that's okay. The connections and the anticipation that that all grew is there for me to tap into again and again and again. This is a marathon, and it may or may not, you may or may not be able to make it to the end, but each day you're going to feel good that you did something. So, how much time do we have? Okay, Matt's saying wrap it up, no worries. Okay, let's go over here. When you talk to people about any one of the situations, the issues that we're dealing with, vaccinations, fluoride, GMOs, endocrine disruptors, the Fed, of course chemtrails, geoengineering, whatever is the popular word that should be used. And don't be afraid of words. Just use whatever word comes up, and you will be eventually to get yourself out of the conversation or to move on in the conversation past your choice of definitions. Fracking. No matter what the rabbit hole is that somebody's interested in, see if you can encourage them to go down that rabbit hole, because I have understood and I have found out that all the rabbit holes meet at the bottom. So no matter what it is, give them that shove, if you can, the help, and let them go. All right, so are we going to go to Clifford's movie next? Okay. Now, I have to tell you a real quick story. Clifford made his movie in 2005, Aerosol Crimes. In 2005, I was asleep. So I got to the movement in about maybe, I think 2008-9 is when I first looked up in the sky and said, this is not right. Eventually really got started with LA Skywatch in 2012, did a lot of demonstrations after that. I never got to see Clifford's movie. I'm going to be sharing the stage with Clifford. Got to see the movie, yeah, got to do this, got to do that. I looked at the first 3 minutes of Aerosol Crimes this morning at 6:30 in the morning in my van, and I was crying. The first 3 minutes of his movie. Please, everybody, order the movie, find the movie. Do you know how I got it? Right? Some nut handing out a DVD a long time ago, and I remembered, and I kept it, and eventually I found it. This is what activism is. Somebody handing out a DVD on a street corner or at a demonstration. This is a seed. This is that piece of information that, you know, is outside of the energetic cage, and then, you know, people take it in. Eventually, I got to this, and I thank you so much for making this. It's just phenomenal. There's a quiet, powerful knowledge in this. And the great thing about what he says in the first 3 minutes is Clifford touched all of what I've been experiencing. And I came to this game much later, much further after that. So, I'm John Knox. This is the road to Tucson, and I finally got here, and this is the ending of that road and the beginning of the next road. And I'm going to let Matt do the rest of the introductions, but thank you for listening. And remember, this is activism. I'm being an activist right now, and you can do the same thing. So don't be afraid of being an activist, please. And I would love to see every one of you out at this demonstration tomorrow. We've got the time. We've got the setup. I got a bullhorn for a megaphone for Matt, so it's going to be. We got signs. Please come out and tell and show me in person that you actually took what I had to say and said, "Yeah, I'll be an activist. I can come out here and stand." All right. Thank you very much.
So we got the live stream up. Thank you, everybody. Sorry about the technical difficulties. So if anybody has a smartphone and wants to get on Facebook and stream this live, Nathan's here. What's up, buddy? From Sedona, Arizona. Okay, so please, if you're not streaming live, please take out your phone and let's tell the world that we're doing this. If you have it available. Hi, everybody. So the live stream is up. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that people that tuned in a little earlier weren't turned off, and I'm sure it's getting shared around now, but there's thousands of people watching this all around the world. Let's talk about activism for a minute. all right? When I first woke up to this, I just hit the ground running, you know? I started printing out flyers, and I'm a work in progress. Every single day I'm growing, right? But like John said, truth is like a frequency, you know? Once you start writing this truth frequency, all these other truths become self-evident, right? You just have to get the ball rolling. Since I came out with the film Frankenskies, frankenskiesmovie.com, check it out. I've been on 70 radio shows. I was on Coast to Coast the other day, 3 million listeners. I've been on a lot of shows, doing everything that I can to get the word out. Thank you. And I'm not expecting everybody to go on radio shows and this and that, but we can all play our part. If you give me your address, I'll send you a stack of flyers for free. Do you know how empowering it is? Do you know how powerful it is to have a flyer in your hand, right? You can go up to somebody on the street, anybody, and say, are you aware that there's an experiment unfolding in Tucson, Arizona? Worldview Enterprises is looking to spray aerosolized chemicals in front of the sun. Their goal is to dim the sky, to dim the sun, to whiten the sky, to take away the blue sky for the future of humanity. And then people will be like, what? This sounds like a science fiction movie. Did you see The Matrix? They did that in The Matrix. Mr. Burns did it too, in The Simpsons. That's what they said. And then you're like, yeah, but it's true. Check it out. And then if we have our phone ringers on, we can turn those off too while we're at it, please. So, please, we're here to inspire you, okay? If you leave here with any message, it's that you can make a difference, right? You can. Trust me. The next activist is sitting next to you and they're just waiting for you to light that fire, waiting for you to encourage them. When I go out with the flyer in my hand, I'll leave the house with one flyer, or 100, or 1,000, whatever it may be. But I'll leave the house with one flyer. And I'll go to the farmer's market, or whatever it may be. I'll walk down the street to Tucson, Arizona. And I'll find that one person. And when I'm out there, I look deep into that person's soul. And I'm like, this person is the one that needs this flyer. And then when I give it to them, they give me a big hug. And they're like, I needed you, thank you. And it's true. They get encouraged and inspired. And then people hit me up a couple years later and they're like, Matt, you changed my life forever. It's amazing. And what I mean by that is, I'm not trying to toot my own horn or anything. I'm saying, you can change someone's life forever. You. It's really powerful, you know? So please, don't be shy. You know, and if you want a t-shirt, you don't have the money, I'll give you a t-shirt, right? I made some shirts, they're pretty awesome. And if you want some flyers, and you don't have the money, I'll mail you flyers. You got a flyer idea, hit me up. If you don't want to talk about geoengineering, I don't care. I'll send you a vegan flyer or fracking, whatever it is, I'll get it done, right? It's all about getting the truth out there, because truth is a frequency. That truth frequency will elevate people's consciousness. It'll bring people to the light. And it's our duty and obligation. Thomas Jefferson said, if you have the ability to help someone in need, you have that responsibility. And we do. We are the truth bringers. We're here for a reason. We're here to bring truth forward to the world. And we're a minority. Hate to say it. But we're here to create that spark, to bring that light. You guys can come start this up. If you want. Clifford's coming on next. This is Clifford's introduction. It's kind of lengthy. Clifford Carnicom. Okay? For those of you that don't know him, talk about living into someone's soul. This man is amazing, right? I mean, if you get the chance to look in his eyes, he's really special. But that aside, he has devoted his life to this. He has devoted his life to activism. Okay? And what that means is he's ready to die for it. Hate to say. And so am I. And so is Ilana. And so is Patrick. You know? All of us are. We put our necks out there. But why? Because we're trying to get numbers. We're trying to create some sparks within everybody else. So that we're not the ones on stage alone. You know what I mean? Next time I have a conference, I want new faces. Next time I have a conference, I want one of you all up there speaking. I just met Fernando.
What's up, brother? Sorry. I just met Fernando. He's a water monkey just like me, born in 1980. And he hit me up and he was like, what are we going to do about this? And I'm trying to get him on the stage. And he's going to come up and talk later. But he's a normal guy, just like me. And we're all just normal people, right? Look at us. We're awesome. All of us, each one of us, we're totally awesome people. And we can bring that light to the world. But the world's going in a crazy direction. So we have that duty and obligation to try, you know? And even if it's just handing someone a flyer at the gas station, or telling people, you know, there's fluoride in your water, and it ain't good for your teeth, you know? Or whatever. Whatever your message is, don't be afraid to shine your light. You feel me? Does this make sense? Also, Ivan. This man, Ivan, he hosted a conference. He put his hard-earned money into it in Phoenix on March 10th. Just now, Truth Mind Reality Conference. And he could have bought a sports car. You know what I'm saying? He could have gotten out and gotten some Nikes and done whatever people do with their money, which I don't know. I don't even buy clothes. I've been wearing the same thing for like 3 years. But what I mean is, Ivan's an inspiration to us all. And so is Fernando. And so is Clifford. And so is Ilana. Right? Because they play their part. And they see an injustice. I'm trying not to curse. And they say, fuck that. So don't be shy. You know? And if you think that war with Syria or fluoride, you know, I'm repeating myself, but you feel me? Like, it's time for us to bring forward the truth for the children. The children are relying on us, and they're not even born yet, and they're already getting vaccinated with Zika viruses when they're in their mother's womb. You know, they're getting hit with EMF radiation. If y'all don't know about 5G, this 5th generation cell phone technology is coming out. Tucson is an experimental city. They're putting towers up. They're blasting microwave radiation, okay? And I can talk about this. I've done shows on this. It really brings tears to my eyes seeing these towers go up. I live in Sedona, Arizona. We have 1 cell tower. They want to put up 22 next year, and they want to put up 100 small cells in this tiny town. My cell phone works. You know what I'm saying? So, and this is just another, like John said, a rabbit hole. This is just another situation, but it is the detriment of the next generation. Okay, we're talking about 1 millimeter waves. These 1 millimeter waves, they bifurcate cells, meaning they split up cells. They cause DNA to fracture. They cause cancer, and they especially impact newborn babies and babies in mommy's tummies. Okay? These babies are coming into this world to bring the light to the next generation, and they're under attack before they're even born. Okay? It's up to us to get this knowledge, to bring it forward, and to protect the youth. It's not about me. Like, we're awake. We're awake. We're awesome. Right? It's not about me and you. It's not about going to our friends and being like, hey, you know about this? It is, but it isn't. It's about the next generation. It's so important because we need to protect these children, or they're going to face some serious hardship. They're going to be, I mean, we're already seeing it. We're already seeing it. But the future is ours to lose or save, and it's up to us. And without disclosure of injustice. Clifford Carnicom, okay, he made a film, Aerosol Crimes. He has a laboratory. He's constantly on the grind studying this fallout from the sky. And he is the foremost top researcher on some really interesting stuff that's going on. And it's not just aluminum. Aluminum being sprayed in our skies is bad enough. All right? And they're trying to normalize it and officialize it with their their experiment, which I'll talk about in my presentation. My presentation is going to be amazing after Clifford. So let's give this man a chance, and thank you for the live stream. Thank you to everyone who's watching. I know that there's thousands of people right now tuning in all over the world, so thank you.
Good morning. Good morning. My name is Clifford Carnicum, and I'm the president and founder of the Carnicum Institute, a nonprofit organization founded in 2008 and has a history of research for close to 10 years before that. My work started in 1998. And this is the title of my presentation. I will be nervous for about 2 or 3 minutes, and then it'll pass, and so we'll get there. This is the title of my presentation this time, Disclosure of Injustice. Before I get started too much, I would like to thank a few people that allowed this to happen and for me to be here. And I'd like to thank Matt Lamon, for making this happen. I'd also like to thank my wife, Carol, who's here, and if you want to talk about steady state, the business of holding things together is pretty important. I have seen many relationships fragmented and destroyed over the issues that we speak of here. And to have the stability and continuity that we have is quite unique and big benefit. Also, there are many volunteers that have allowed the Carnicum Institute to become what it has over the years. And they are all entirely volunteers. They have given up much of their lives for work that we've done together. And some of those people are with us here today, and that's a rare treat for me. Kaylee, John's not here, Gary is here, Alana, I've been associated with for many years, not formally through the Institute, but as a friend and a collaborator. Also, Kate Willems is a very important person in the constitution of the Institute and its work. So there are other people that allow these things to happen. I am an independent researcher. I do not claim any titles that are not warranted by my performance in life. I'm going to read a paragraph that I wrote. I wrote this a few days ago. It's sort of interesting to me. There's a couple of words coming out here today regarding the word of truth and the word of youth. I'm going to read a paragraph, and then we're going to do some talking. I need to wear glasses. We are at a transition of generations, and karmic restitutions for the harms that have been imposed upon this planet remains overdue. You, in this audience, are the torch that is to carry forward. My last public conference presentation was in August 2012 in Los Angeles, California. So it's been a while since I've been out of the woodwork. What is unknown is that I was very ill and in tremendous pain during that entire event, and the symptoms that I experienced continue to be related to some of the topics that I will discuss today. In spite of certain hardships of that weekend, I was able to make at least one primary point. We must all strive to recognize that our topics of discussion here include both geoengineering and bioengineering. And by geoengineering, I do not mean that our sole and primary focus is that of weather and its control. By geo and bioengineering, I refer to the attempt to exert complete control over all primary geophysical and biological processes on this planet. My more comfortable turf is that of the laboratory and the natural world, rather than the podium. But unless I come to speak to you occasionally, it is unlikely that you will have much of a sense as to what takes place in the lab. It is a place of continuous discovery and deep contemplation, without any doubt. But it is also a very sobering and in many ways overwhelming affair, as I realize I am incapable of expressing to you all that has been realized over the years. 2 points to make today. Number one, the laws of nature and the divine will always prevail. It is simply a matter of time. Number two, the reason for my work is because of the flagrant violation of those natural and divine laws. And this is my calling. You too will have your own calling. And if I provide anything to be remembered here, I hope that I may serve as a catalyst to discover that fact. And now, okay, so this is the outline we're going to try to cover. Oh yeah. Well, I'm not sure how this will work. We'll see. I'm not sure. We'll give this a try. I always have a problem with time. I understand I have an hour max, and I'll do my best. So far, I've never made it. Not even close. But in that world, this is what I'd like to cover today. I've actually tried to restrict this. The general theme here today is that I'd like to try and pick 4 representative topics, things that would represent this topic, this issue. It's not a single issue. And give a little bit of time to each. Understanding that the more that we understand, these are not isolated topics. These are topics that will all draw together. And, I've come up with the understanding that, I'm not the soundbite person. I certainly know that. But I know that, like, if we were to engage in conversation, I've learned that it really wouldn't matter what question you started with. You could start with any question you wanted. And if you're willing to listen to me long enough or engage in conversation, I will eventually bring in everything. It's just a matter of time. So it doesn't necessarily matter where we start, but these are, let's say, high priority items that we might feel this is an introduction. So this is the outline. I won't even have time to go through these slides. Can they be seen? Can you read these? And in the back, can they be read? Okay, I hope that's the case. If you cannot read it, let me go fill in the spots for you, but I will not have time to read these. So I'm hoping to take along with what I'm saying. This is what I hope to do. We'll see what we cover. And turn off the overhead lights to read it. Whatever they do, Wednesday, there's a request to turn the light up top. And is my voice coming out okay in general? Now read. Okay. Yeah, that'll be the weakness. This is the one probably before. That makes a difference here. I can hear it and it's okay. Call me anytime because our job is job done. So if I don't do mine, you gotta help me. So there was a request to dim the lights. Has that taken place? Okay? I'm hoping it takes place because I'm not in control of the lights. Right? So let's go on and let's keep that request alive. So you don't suffer.
That's internal. Yeah. That's
okay, so that's the outline.
I mean,
trying to hit those 4
sorry.
center points, and even of the center 4, I'm going to try and 2 of them are the strongest. Okay, this is in the background. Again, don't have time to go through it. This is in the background. People relate to issues in different ways. I have an analytical mind, but I'm also learning to play the dulcimer a little bit. So my mind is trying in different ways. Yes, she said it real close. So, but people relate in different ways. And this is this is the question. Who is it that you think had an interest in the type of work that I'm involved in? Who do you think had an interest in that work in 2000? Almost 20 years ago. Who do you think has an interest in the work? This is the list. This is a list of people and organizations and entities that have an interest in the type of work that I'm speaking of, but this interest was expressed 20 years ago, roughly, when you were able to learn that this interest was expressed. Systems now, and shortly after this, cut off access to this type of information. But there was a window in which I was able to gather information about who it was that had an interest in the work.
Yeah.
We don't have time to go through it, but you will basically see every military, every intelligence, every health, every media, every security, every governmental organization that embodies this country, at the least, in portions of the world.
Do you want me to
That is who on this list. So some of you relate in different ways, but this is a question you get to ask. Is what we're talking about, now I can't say today, in these decades, in our lives, are these issues real? Now, Matt has done a wonderful job with his film of bringing in that early history that we watched today. Again, ask yourself, is the issue that we're speaking of, issues, are they real? That history is very helpful to understand. We're not talking about 2018. We're talking about 1930. As a matter of fact, when an aircraft can fly, there's an interest in using that aircraft for anything you can get done with it. Okay? 1930s on. My work starts in 1998, 1999. I am adding another dimension to that history. Won't have time to go through the list, but it's a very intriguing and interesting list, without any doubt. I hope you can read it. I know that print is smaller in the back, right? But can you pick up any of it? All right, I'll read 3 or 4 just for examples. Okay, this is random. Allergan Pharmaceutical Corporation, Boeing Aircraft Corporation, Harvard Pilgrim Health Center, headquarters, United States Pentagon is all over the place, Air Force. Every intelligence agency in the country is there. Raytheon Defense, Lockheed Martin, Fort Lewis. Okay, it's just anybody that can pull the strings with regard to how the United States public is affected. Okay, that's in your background. It's not my intention to dwell on that. I just want to, for people that don't like the science business, there's other ways of learning about an issue, as John has introduced us. Okay, this one's been building for a long time. I've done it in isolated fashion in the past. My goal is today to put on the record, put it on the record, it's Clifford E. Carnicum, it's my claim, but to put on the record that there are 3 agencies, as a minimum, there are others, there are 3 agencies or entities at a minimum that I have personal experience, direct relationship or contact with over the years that I regard as causing injustice to those people of this world. And these 3 agencies are the specific agencies for which I will make that claim. I know that others may make other claims, but this results from my direct experience. I have to be brief, but I will give you the specific violation from each one that I have seen. First one is the United States Environmental Protection Agency. It goes back to 1999. In 1999, that agency was delivered a very unique and specific environmental sample material. We can talk about that material forever. Let's just say it was unique and foreign to the environment. It required an explanation for its presence. Almost anything I speak of in my work, almost without any question, has multiple occurrences before I'm even interested in it. I'm a person that studies patterns. I have an analytical mind. I look for repetition. I'm not out on a lark on a single item. When I say something happened, you had numerous instances of a very unusual, it's a filament material, appearing in an airborne fashion across this country. Eventually it comes across the world. And that agency was given that material, a representative sample, with a reasonable request. It was not unreasonable. It was a reasonable request to identify the nature of that material on behalf of the public interest. It was not a hostile letter, but it was assertive. Anything I speak of is in the record. My work exists on that website that I hope you picked up on the header, carnicuminstitute.org. The Institute's work is comprised of roughly 300 to 400 pages of research, all original work, primarily from me, and everything that I speak of, almost without exception, is in that record. The correspondence that I'm speaking of to you right now, certified mail, is in that record. This agency was given the material with this reasonable request. Their response, first of all, they did not even acknowledge physical receipt of the material. They sent a letter back. Their phrase was, "We are not aware." This their phrase of choice. They did not acknowledge physical receipt of the material, which would be the first requirement. What happens next? What happens next is a year and a half of elapsed time with no acknowledgement of receipt nor response other than the phrase that we are not aware of anything unusual. Remember, my point was to make them aware, right? Because I'm the one who delivered. So for one to say you're not aware defies the very basis of the request to begin with. A year and a half passes. What happens? A third party comes into the mix, submits a FOIA, Freedom of Information Act, says, hey folks, you got to do something here. What did the EPA do? They sent the material back to me after a year and a half without acknowledging. And what was their reply? The reply said essentially the following, if it's paraphrased slightly, but it is of the following. The EPA stance is, we have no responsibility to identify unsolicited material. Do you understand what that is saying? This is saying, okay, I'm a representative. I'm hired by you, the public, to perform a service for you. You come to me and ask for engagement of my service, and I'm required to do so. I say, I don't have to serve you unless I ask you. Right? This is what it says. Okay, I'll get my cues that I got to move. I will have to move. But these things are at the heart of the issue. This is 1999. Can you imagine how this is affecting my mind? Okay? I worked for the federal government for a good 15 years of my life. Okay? I regard myself as a public servant. This is why I'm here. I'm still a public servant. I just happen to leave that particular branch or branches. We got to move on. And these are painful. This is not fun for me. I do whatever is needed. That's been my calling in life. I'll leave a secure position in life. If I got to do it, I will. These are injustices of the most fundamental type that have been imposed upon the populace. That's number one. I got to get through 3 and 4, right? 2, United States Air Force. What is the infraction of the United States Air Force? The infraction of the United States Air Force is when presented with an accumulating evidence by the public en masse over an extended period of time that something transformational is happening in our atmosphere, again, with reasonable cause, the response of the United States Air Force is, this is a hoax. This is their formal response. This is a hoax. And any information has been put forth by disreputable sources. This was their statement. Any information that they had been given was made by disreputable sources, and this was all a hoax. This hurt me quite a bit. My father's a Navy man. My father was in the Navy for 30 years. I grew up as what they call a Navy brat. It was very hard for me to hear that because, I'm sorry, it was a lie. When you say something is a hoax, right, we can go into definition. That was a lie. There is a point when you call a spade a spade. That was a lie, and I knew it was a lie. Okay? Now, what the public, there's a certain signature that went with that statement, that this all issues a hoax. And that statement, that signature was Lieutenant Colonel Gibson. Gibson was the last name of the guy, the last name of the guy. Hey, the nervousness is passing me. Okay. So guess what? The title of this guy, the position of this guy is something like Public Liaison Officer. This is his name. So the impression is that this is a person to facilitate communications to the public, right? To serve as a bridge between those that need help and our representatives that provide us help in government. That was his stated position. It took me several years later, again, everything's in the record if you look at it, several years, and I came across a quite interesting little article. And guess who it was? Guess what it was? It was a little promotion, a little ceremony for Lieutenant Gibson, if I have his position. He was Lieutenant Colonel. And guess who Lieutenant Colonel Gibson really is? Lieutenant Gibson is a Master Intelligence Officer. This is his actual position. Okay? I'm not after making up your minds for you, but I analyze the heck in my life. And you just ask yourself, what is the function of a master intelligence officer in the military? I gotta move. Number 3, Centers for Disease Control. Okay? What did this agency do? This is a quiet one that sort of just nothing people even have strong of interest in. I do it to really get into the biochemistry of things later on. There is a public health issue. Many of us have heard of the term or familiar with it. The name has been given more gallons. There is a health issue. That name was given informally. The condition has no formal acceptance within the established medical community, and it has acquired that name through social means, social mechanisms. And I once heard a doctor, he said to me, you know, you've got this problem with this particular condition, because there's a rule in medicine, and the rule is the patient isn't allowed to name the disease. And unfortunately, there's truth in what he said, and this is part of the problem of formal acceptance. What did the CDC do? The CDC purported, and everything I would say would have to be qualified here, because the fact is it was a sham. It was a lie, and this is why I have to put it here. They purported to conduct a study, a scientific study on this health condition. Now, if somebody tells me to have a scientific study, it's like, eventually, I can have a summary statement, but eventually I'm going to need those details, right? I've got to have the details of that report. Well, I read the summary. I never saw the details. Like, you never see them. I can't swear they're not there. I didn't see them. I saw what was put out for the public. If you dug, the common person didn't find this, but I read their report. This report did not do justice in so many ways. It did not do justice to the public. It did not do justice to the participants of this study. And what it did was act as an avenue for social influence rather than answer scientific objective questions. What it did was two strong violations. Number one, it framed the participants of the study as being, let's call it, psychological dubious nature. Okay, people that generally had problems in their life of a psychological nature. It did not address the fundamental scientific question, which is based on physical material. If you get involved with this health issue, you will be dealing with physical material. You will have to examine that physical material, and you will have to ask yourself, what is the nature of that physical material? That, of course, should be the objective of the scientific study, right? That wasn't the focus, the theme of this report. It said, these folks, you know, seems like maybe there's some drinking or some drugs going on here. Okay? Really dubious character with this pool of people. Wait till you get to a survey that has been conducted independently. You will see quite a contrast. As a matter of fact, you'll see a shift where you will see general motive of the people seems quite health-oriented, actually. That was infraction number 1. Infraction number 2 was they made this statement to the effect of, you know, there is something here physical, and they say, it's protein. And the casual person might say, wow, they've identified something, it's protein. Okay? But I had a real problem with that, because when I heard that statement, and somebody said it was protein, and by the level of my work at that time, I knew enough to say, hey, I need to know some things, folks. Protein, what is the nature of that protein? And I mean in detail at this point. When I'm talking about scientific study by the premier health organization of this country, oh man, am I looking for details. And guess what? There wasn't a single detail in there, other than a generic statement, which actually has no meaning in terms of the interpretation that can now be understood of that physical material. I know that's a little vague, but I'm saying it said nothing of value, and it in a derogatory fashion, characterized the participants of that study. That's 3. These are 3 to be on the record. Number 4, you notice it's blank, a little slightly blank, right? It's all I can tell you is that there is a number 4 in the works. And I can't go into the specifics too much. I just can't at this point. I will when I can. There's still some issues of legality in this one. But the issue there, the general process is one of a legal judgment and statement, that a process that needs to take place. That's the issue involved. And so in that process of evaluation, there is a statement being made by this particular agency. And the statement being made is that this process will not carry forward at this point because the peer-reviewed literature, that's a loaded phrase nowadays, for me it is, the peer-reviewed literature says that this issue is non-existent and that any claims about it are based on something called delusional parasitosis. Now, the other thing that I can say is that the legal process that we're talking about that needs to take place. Oh, is it still away, huh? I'll try. The legal process that's involved in this, the very nature of the process is one of examination of merit of the information provided, not peer-reviewed literature. As a matter of fact, peer-reviewed literature would seem totally irrelevant to me in the process. But it has, that argument, that basis has been invoked as the basis of refusal of a legal process. So that's what I get to say on that, is that there are four. And just point out here something if the mic goes right. Need to move. Okay, so those are on the record. Now is where I was hoping to get to these four topics. Let's see how we are. Four topics. One's going to be the ionosphere. One is going to be some unusual web material. Number 3 will be a little bit on the protein business. And number 4 is about something that should raise some hackles. Let's try and get them as best we can. How am I doing? How am I doing on time, Carol? Yeah, I'm sorry. I wish you could attach it to me. That's what a lapel for, right? But it's going to have to be worked off. Just point out. Okay, so this is an instrument. What's the topic here? The ionosphere. Why the ionosphere? One of the fundamental claims that came out in my work, I'll go ahead and move to the next one to let you know how long this has been brewing. One of the fundamental claims in my work came up fairly early, as far back as 2001. You notice we have a very important book that's come out by Alana a year ago or so, or this last year. And let's just say there's a history here. And the history on my side goes back close to 2001. I was becoming quite interested in the ionosphere close to 2001. That previous slide was an instrument that I purchased, very hard to acquire at that time, very hard for me to find. I like information direct from the source. I like to solve, if I'm after solving a problem, I'll look and see if anybody's answered it. But if not, I will do the work the best I can. And this was happening with the ionosphere. I had certain questions coming up. And the questions were, you know, it looks like these alterations to the atmosphere that are taking place, aircraft are involved here. I don't claim a thread of connection I don't have, but it's clear there's an association with aircraft. Materials that are being distributed into the atmosphere have the chemical and physical properties where I am starting to ask about the questions of ionization and the electrical nature very early in the game. And this is starting back in 2001. And I'm buying instruments and I'm measuring. I'm actually trying to measure ionic count. What is an ion? It's a charged particle. So when you strip off an electron, it's charged, electrically charged. Best example of relating to the ionosphere would be your neon light tubes. Okay? There's no wire in that tube, right? There's no wire in a neon light tube. It's gas. Gas in there, right? But guess what? That gas in there is electrically charged, and that's what allows that energy to go through. So I was interested in what I was seeing, that it looks like the atmosphere could be undergoing change, which was within electrical properties, which is a whole different dimension going on. So the work started early, and then things brew. There's many times where I'll work on something that was a certain stage of work that said, indeed, there is something that looks like it's different with respect to the electrical nature of the atmosphere. But remember, I'm restricted down here to ground earth, right? I've got a whole atmosphere up here. I can only measure where I am. So this has been growing in over the last 2 decades, and there's been a resurgence. There's been another level of that work that's come up over the last year or so. And I've always had this fundamental problem, and it's always been an issue. You want to get to the source of the data. Well, where is the source of the data in this case? It's 250 miles up there. I can't get to it. And that is difficult for me. It frustrated me from the beginning. There was something years ago, I knew there was something that I could get that would help me. And it's called the electron density profile, and it's where you get the density of electrons all through the atmosphere, way up there, 250 miles. Okay? And I went to get that information, and guess what? I couldn't find it. I could not find it. My conclusion at that time was that that information is classified. Now, time has passed, and it struck me again because I got recently involved in this more directly. I'm a ham radio operator, amateur radio operator. I started noticing some things that really caught my attention. Radio frequencies, if you look into the history of that in amateur radio, it is using the ionosphere. What it's about is sending a radio signal up. They bounce off. This is how radio was discovered. Bounce off that ionosphere and it comes back down. So hams do this, so I get to do that as part of the privilege of my license. So I watch and I study things, and I started to really notice a few things over the years. One was at a camp we were at then called Henderson up there in, I was on the Montana side, and we were out there in a beautiful sunny day, just nothing happening, and all of a sudden there was what I call an operation that took place right over our camp. And all I can say is, within 15 minutes, the propagation conditions for this communication I'm talking about, they just changed instantly, radically improved communications. And it really struck my attention. I called it my wife's attention, and that went on. Second level that happened is that this last winter when we were out in the south in our travels, I started noticing that something very unusual similar. I was getting these passive communications that were going clear across the country with a frequency that doesn't support that. Where I was talking, these bands were made for what their local communications in terms of ham world. Something should go a couple hundred miles. That's short for hams. A couple hundred miles around me, I can send a signal. That's what's expected. But I was going 1,000 miles, and it just really wasn't making a lot of sense. You have to be really careful about this stuff and not draw to real quick conclusions, because life is complicated, and the ionosphere is very complicated. And by the way, there's a good reason for that electron density to be classified, because it's an incredibly dynamic environment that would be extremely important in the knowledge of propagation of energy through that medium, if you caught that one. I noticed that there was something happening that indicated very unusual propagation that didn't make sense with a conventional explanation of the state of the ionosphere. And the third was, you know how Matt was mentioned in his film there about the woodpecker, okay? Woodpecker is notorious. Back in '88 when I first got my license, I was hearing the woodpecker. And the woodpecker is claimed to be a radar system in that time by the Russians, and that was back in 1998. Kid on the block in terms of, instead of a woodpecker, there's a new one on the block. And I'm hearing it on the radio. And the problem, again, is one of distance and range. It's supposed to be, okay, the claim is, from Russia and China, it has to be closer. Because of the nature of the bands I'm using, communication bands, it has to be something relatively close. So, that are not fitting very well, because three unique points in time that represent the very, okay? Sun's very, very quiet, and we're headed, every graphs are my way of trying to show it to you, that there's something fishy going on, it looks like, and those little dots on there are a representation of that electron density I'm talking to you about. Electron density means energy, is what it means. It means propagation of energy. It means the development of systems that use energy, okay, i.e., communication, military, would be the action and military application. And what I'm saying is that the nature of the ionosphere has changed. This is the first time that I have been able to get data up there. This is directly in the source. This is an instrument that shoots that stuff up
okay, and many exceptions. I'm saying visually, these are regional representations. What the state of affairs was in 1996, things were pretty quiet. 1999, right? This is when I believe that the operations in general started in the early 90s, 93, 94, 98, so they seem to really have picked up steam. 2009 is when things have picked up pretty darn well by that time, and this is the latest one, the recent I could get. Okay? So visually, I'm making the case, what's called between these things that I'm saying, and all I'm going to say is, yeah, these numbers show differences. If you really look at those numbers, really out there in terms of statistics. This data is saying we've got something. The claim is that the fundamental nature of the ions that I have is saying, indeed, this thing cannot have to guess at this point. I can make the case access the state of affairs up 200 down here. Okay, let's get into this issue of the ionosphere. You first started, but when you find one thing, you just go where the data leads. Messing with that thing, and you increase the electron density up there, guess what? You get to ask, I think that many appearing, and we have an ozone, effect of ozone, isn't it reasonable to think that many of us go for the data? Sometimes all the data is showing. The point here is that the ozone, and why am I saying this? I'll get to why in just a second, but ozone to heal itself. You might have a public perception. Okay, and what's my answer in this case? Again, if I look at the data, actually, I do come to the conclusion that the UV level. But what I'm trying to ozone and UV, and that's the data. And the scenario that we're talking about an increase of density in the electrons in the ionosphere. How many people are talking about? No one. But that is the basis for a thread of. And so I look at all the reasons that UV light can increase down at ground level. Source that went through 7 reasons, right? I stepped through every one of them. None of them has what? One of the reasons have increased aerosols, pollution, and haze. You will have an increase in that. That's a more complex scenario that makes sense. It's the very last one. Okay, and what to say at the bottom? That's something to remember what I'm saying. When you start messing, are you going to tell me that you have guaranteed control over all the dynamic processes that interacts with? I say no. Human beings have not proved themselves very well. That statement says uncontrollable dynamics. You've got 3 fields already you're working with, and nobody even knows what's going on publicly with them. Got to move. Increased energetics of ionosphere and quiet little statement, right? Stuff, fine, but you want to know what it's about. What does it mean? What does it do for? About the rulers. Okay. Number 2, called the spider web problem. There's credit to begin to allow a certain threshold to be. This ties back to the United States Environmental Material, Unusual Material. We have a 20-year period of. Terry Lawton is an activist today in Ireland that did something that no one else had done that I needed. I have actually received many samples of this material over the years. I have. I'm intimately familiar with the material. But Terry Lawton did something a little unusual. That is a filament nature material. Okay. He does the next smart. He does the 2 things that are needed at the first time that I know of. Third step, what does Terry Lawton do? That's smart